Welcome to Power Up Your Practice, the go-to podcast for law firm owners and managing attorneys working on the business, not in it. I'm Ruby Powers, your guide into the heart of law practice management, bringing you insights from leading legal minds, trailblazing attorneys, and expert guests who provide you with an actionable perspective on running your firm more effectively and efficiently. Prepare to open your mind, be inspired, and power up your practice to the next level. Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Ruby Powers with Power Up Your Practice, your companion through the ever-evolving landscape of law practice management. And in each episode, we're going to get to hear from our guests about their superpowers or perspectives on reaching success and how they can better help us run our law firms. Today, I have a good friend of mine, Zina Brown. She's a principal talent management executive. She actually runs lots of different pursuits at the same time, from being a moderator to a talent acquisition leader and honestly, a fractional recruiter as well. So today we're going to talk a lot about what type of services a staffing or recruiting agency can benefit a law firm, as well as a lot of different techniques and things to know about when hiring, which is a constant thing that we do as law firm owners. So Zina, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing wonderful, Ruby. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Well, my pleasure. Why don't you fill us in the rest of your bio and help get us organized?
I'll probably forget more than I remember, but basically, my name is Zina Brown, and I co-own a company called CoreTechs Direct. We merged about 12 years ago with a company called CoreTechs Personnel, and we also have a brand called Pop-Up Talent. In addition to that, I've had a lot of successful ventures. I've started several different professional services organizations, including Houston HOA Management, which we sold about 2 years ago now, in addition to some other ventures in California. And most recently, my focus and my passion is in the recruiting and staffing industry. I've actually been in the industry for 34 years, but there's always a new way to reinvent yourself and approach the industry different, which is what we're doing with the brand Pop-Up Talent. So we're a national recruiting firm. We provide basically whatever you need in the staffing and recruitment industry, whether it's contract staffing, contingency, executive search, and then under the Pop-Up Talent brand is more along fractional recruiting or hourly based recruiting, where you can hire an expert professional recruiter for a fraction of the time.
Okay, so we're going to need to unpack a lot of this here. What I think for a lot of really small firms, usually the owner or the office manager or administrator or whatever is the one that's sort of tasked with trying to hire. And it's like, oh, someone, resigns or just disappears or some variation of that spectrum. Sure. And you're like, oh crap, what do I do? And, if you're organized, you might have the job description, a posting, some questions, and get some of those templates. But why don't you walk us through what can a staffing or recruiting agency do for a law firm? And then you mentioned a lot of things about fractional and,
Sure.
type of thing. So maybe define things first.
No, I would love to do that. I think the biggest key to success in recruiting is to always be recruiting. And that's even when you're not recruiting or you're not actively hiring. So, in sales and for your rainmakers in the firm, they're always selling, but you're always recruiting too. There are a variety.
I think you're really right. And I think that we shouldn't take that as that something's wrong with our firm because we're having to do that. And in fact, I was talking to an attorney and he told me that he had someone on staff very similar to like what you do. And he's always thinking a few attorneys deep to make sure that if he ever has a shortage, like he's got somebody, on the bench ready to go. And so I think that's a really good big paradigm shift because it might make you feel like, well, why are we always having to hire and onboard and train and everything like that? Anyway, Sure. Continue.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You want to be proactive with your pipeline, just like you in your sales pipeline and your client pipeline. You want to always be selling, always be recruiting, always have a pipeline or a network of resources to pull from. It's no fun to hire when you have one person to choose from, right? So whatever you can do to keep that pipeline going, to increase your network, you should always do that. There are a variety of ways in which any company can hire. I work with a lot of different law firms, and the small to mid-sized companies, I think, often think that utilizing a recruiting or a staffing agency is not within their finances or isn't within their budget. But there are cost-effective ways to use recruiting and staffing firms. You can hire a contract agency to hire a temporary resource in which you can bring them in on a W-2 basis. That removes liability from the law firm. If you hire on a 1099, that's a little bit more dangerous, especially if you're trying to direct their work. You want to be in a situation where maybe you don't have the ability to hire and provide benefits, but if you're working with a third party agency, all of those benefits and things like that, and payroll deductions and tax payments and all of that is eligible and available through that staffing firm. That's one way to hire. Another way is through a contingency search. Maybe you're trying to secretly replace someone. They're not doing well, or they're subpar performing. So you could engage a professional contingency or executive search firm to go after that person and recruit someone who's going to be their replacement on a confidential basis. The downside of that process is it's usually about 20 to 30% of the base annual salary. And even in the most cost-effective places in the US, that's probably a $20,000 to a $50,000 fee at a minimum. So
when you do that, you don't know how long they might, if it's going to be, I mean, you're ideally hoping it's a good fit, but you don't know there's no guarantee of like how long they're going to work or anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Even if they're a good fit, that doesn't keep the next recruiter or the next managing partner or from coming along and recruiting them out or enticing them with better benefits or better opportunity or more hybrid remote workplace. So it is a little bit risky of an investment. If you have a strong, solid recruitment partner, then hopefully they would allow you to have some grace if someone were recruited out quickly. But most of the time, those types of arrangements come with about a 30, 60, 90-day guarantee. So on the 91st day, if that person that you've paid that $30,000 fee for leaves, you're outside of the relationship and hoping to maintain the relationship and sort of leverage the relationship contractually, you're usually out of luck. Right. And so it becomes an expensive adventure that you're going down. The other way is recruiting on your own. You can hire an in-house recruiter. You can hire a part-time recruiter. The downside of that, and that's a way to go, especially if you can get someone who specializes in the legal industry or in your specific industry or vertical. The downside of that is recruiters are not inexpensive, and then they need tools in order to be successful. So if you hire an in-house recruiter, right, because you're scaling up, or if you're a small firm, odds are you need to hire a couple of people and then you don't need them anymore. So you're laying them off and then you're paying unemployment. So a really great way to go. Yeah. So that can be problematic. Like, yes, you need to hire, but maybe not enough to afford an in-house recruiter. And if you need an in-house recruiter, what is the investment that you're making in order for that recruiter to have the tools and resources they need in order to be successful? Everything from an applicant tracking system or an HRIS system.
What is an HRIS system?
Human Resources Information System. So basically it's a combination of an applicant tracking system, a human resources system. Usually corporations use an HRIS system, where a recruiting firm would use more of a ATS with a CRM. But you can store the resumes there. You can onboard through those processes, things like that. Even in the more sophisticated systems, you can manage payroll, things along those lines. So in order to have a recruiter, I mean, you can go old school and use paper and email, right? But that limits their efficiency. And then they still need premier tools, right? So what are the benefits of premier tools, such as advertising your positions on LinkedIn or Indeed, or some of the premier tools that are out there, even, lawyer.com. And there's different industry specific tools that can be beneficial. Is one, that you're branding your firm, you're branding your organization through that, right? It's constantly having the network out there, spreading the word of mouth, but also its efficiency. A lot of small to mid-sized firms, maybe they have a budget for a one-off ad, right? And so they go to their go-to place to run an ad, but then you're limiting your candidate pool of resources. So that's problematic. but you can't hire a recruiter if the recruiter doesn't have the tools and resources they need in order to be successful, right? The other risk is obviously scaling up or down. When you scale down, the recruiter is the first person to go. You don't need them anymore. But there's also a mistake that my human resources person can also do my recruiting. And those are two very different skill sets, right? Or my office manager can do my recruiting. Sure, your office manager can collect the resumes, and sure, your office manager can do a preliminary interview for compensation or availability to start or why they're interested. But when it comes to really digging in and getting down to the real motivating factors, the cultural fit, the gaps in the resume, the things that a professional recruiter would really look for, those things can be missed out, especially if you have an office manager or a human resources person whose primary responsibilities are very different than recruiting. They're just sort of supplementing and trying to help out the firm or help out your organization, but they have all these other laundry list of responsibilities and things to do. And so we're really sort of Band-Aid solutioning this whenever you try to hire utilizing your existing staff, because they're not skilled and don't have the professional recruiting training. I mean, little things that, in looking for a job title or a skill search or utilizing the various tools that are out there, you really handicap them and limit your pipeline when you're trying to supplement your recruiting from that methodology.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, I was in, oh yeah, you were in Vistage too. Like one time they had a consultant come talk to us, and they're like, you have a 50-50 chance of getting, lucky to get the right hire or something. I don't know what their percentage was, but like, this is how all the ways people do this wrong, like they don't do references. They don't ask behavioral questions. They don't do personality assessment. They don't, do whatever background check, all the, and then like, people say whatever they want you to hear, and they get skilled. Some people are amazing interviewers, and if you don't know what you're doing, no, I completely agree. Like, we've been having a company give us with virtual assistants, and they hire and put like maybe 2 people up for us to interview, and it just takes so much of the work out of the equation, because we're not posting, we're not interviewing a lot, and we're not doing all that back end stuff, which is so time consuming. And if you're the untrained person, you're just sort of flopping around and probably getting the wrong person in the first place. So I think ultimately this is one of the biggest issues that hinders firm growth, is the retention, recruiting, retention of talent, and keeping them, that retention of keeping those really good employees and staff engaged. And it's sort of like, who do you want to invite to the party? If you invite the wrong person to the party, it can sort of like ruin the whole mood. And you're like, how do we proceed? Yeah. Absolutely. So well, how does a firm, what are some of the things firms can do? Like, so you gave a lot of different options. Like, what would you say for like a small firm, and they're like sort of dipping their toe into like looking into your services that you provide, or your suite of services and things like that? What would you say would be like one that would help, break them into it a little bit and get comfortable potentially?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I think it really depends on what your end goal is. So if you have someone on maternity leave and you need a paralegal to come in and maybe supplement for a month, well, then a temporary resource is probably the way to go, right? You pay you have your paralegal's rate, and then you have a markup on top of that, and that markup leads you to a bill rate, and that bill rate covers the payroll, the workers' comp insurance, any type of liability insurance, paying their taxes, all of those different things. And they're W-2'd, so you're at less risk if you hire someone who's 1099, where you truly can't direct their hours in their day or tell them they have to be at work at 9 a.m. or whatever the case may be. It's also a good option on contract to hire, because then you can, if it's maybe you are thinking about a long-term investment, you can try them out before you actually hire them. I think that that's the way to go if you're looking for a true short-term hire, right? Maybe even just a couple weeks, or your receptionist is gone for the day and you just need someone to come in and be present to greet your potential clients. I provide a service where we basically provide a recruiter for our clients, and we charge a flat hourly rate, and that's the sort of the fractional recruitment model. And you can get fractional human resources and fractional CFOs. We provide a bit of a fractional recruiter. And that's where you get a recruiter for a fraction of the time. Now, basically, you can hire recruiters and they come equipped for a flat hourly rate with all of the tools and resources they need to be successful only when you need them. You can scale their hours up, down, start, stop, pause at any time. And so it's really a good cost-effective solution to get in and get out and getting your recruitment done. Average fill time is 40 hours, goes up and down. You know, if we're looking for a front office person, that's probably going to be closer to 10 hours. If you're looking for a software solutions architect to design your new law firm practice software, well, we're probably talking about 65 hours, right? Overall to fill the positions. But it's a really cost-effective way to have your company, number one, to brand, to have a goodwill ambassador out there in front of the audience to really recruit in an area of expertise, and to be able to have a flat hourly rate where you can manage your time and have resources of candidates coming from more than one place, right? Most of the law firm owners that I know, or practice managers, they're recruiting from their alumni organizations, they're recruiting students, word of mouth, and maybe at the networking events that they go to, and maybe a one-off ad on LinkedIn or something like that, right? But what if you had a resource where you could have networking, professional affiliations, LinkedIn, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, Career Builders, even RigZone, like all of these different types of resources where you can attract everyone that's out in the marketplace and really increase your candidate funnel so that you have a better selection process to get and feel confident in the best hire that you have.
You know, it sort of makes me think about how if you don't know what you're doing and you just throw some like Google ads or ads out there, you're just sort of wasting money and so like I guess with the same thing, like it's relatively easy to put something on what am I thinking?
Indeed.
The one. Indeed, right. That's what you know, but I mean sometimes when I see my credit card bill, I'm like, ask the office manager, what did we do? Why is it so expensive? Like it just, when we're posting things, because I've noticed over the many years, it's like, and if she has to go in and say this person didn't qualify somehow, so we don't get charged something crazy. And anyway, but if you don't know what if you're not really trained, it's easy to rack up a big bill. And it's like you're saying, there's all these different resources. Like one of the things I'm impressed by you is like how much LinkedIn. Like I've been getting into it this last year or so, but like I think since I've had my own company for 15 years, I don't really care so much, but like because I'm not looking for a job. Like I think some people think it's only about, trying to get your next job or something, but really it's not. It's a professional space. It's almost feel like it's a professional link Facebook or something, but also it's a great, depending on where your clients live, like in my case, employment investment-based immigration, it makes sense for me to live in LinkedIn, but
absolutely.
You have all these like cool bells and whistles. Like, I don't know, you know what people are thinking before they post something on LinkedIn, right?
I try to stay one step ahead. I think, what you're speaking to is like a pain point for so many people, Ruby, as a business owner. Look, I own several businesses, and when it's something that's not my expertise, I outsource it. Right. So I'm not a CPA. I'm not a tax auditor or a tax consultant. I outsource that. Well, I don't know why, a lot of people think, well, everybody can recruit. Well, really, it's not true. If you're not maximizing your spend on Indeed, and if you haven't taken the class and you really know how to use Indeed or a ZipRecruiter or LinkedIn, then you're reactive to whatever candidates are responding. You're missing out on the passive candidates that are probably the people that you really want to hire. Right. And then at the same time, little things like just thumbs upping, thumbs down. I mean, silly little tricks like that, or how you use the language in your posting, how many times you list the job description or the job title, right? Or the variations of that. All of that can have an impact on who can find you, who can see you, who's interested in the job. And then there's just the whole entire aspect of you need to be practicing law. That's running your firm, right? That's where you make your money, right? You don't want to spend your day going through, you're advertising for an immigration law firm or immigration attorney who's maybe licensed in multiple states that speaks 3 languages, but you're spending your time sifting through law students, sifting through someone who maybe wants a job in the legal field but hasn't passed their bar. And so it's taking up all your time, or the time of your office manager, or the time of your human resources person, when really they should be sort of a first line of defense, really not in the trenches doing the work, because they're not professionally trained, right? I couldn't begin to be a paralegal or probably even a receptionist at a law firm, right? That's not my skill set. So I think it's really not a good use of time. And while the investment can seem a little daunting and scary, at the same time, it is an efficient use of your time, and it's going to get you the best results and the best selection of options that are out there for you.
So, what are some, and I mean, the other thing we're not even mentioning is just like if you get the wrong person in that seat, just the turnover costs that you're wasting, because it can impact the culture. How long are you willing to wait until you figure out they're the wrong fit, and then just having to replace them and all the lost work.
Start all over it.
Right.
Yeah. I read someplace, Ruby. So sorry to interrupt. But I read.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I think it was about a week ago. So I work with a major national firm in mass tort, and they. I did some research for them, and I think that the number. This was just about a week ago. That if you have a bad hire in a law practice, it's like 200% plus of your cost to replace that person. So it's in a law firm, it's much higher than a bad hire in maybe a recruiting firm or a accounting firm, or some of the other professional service industries that are out there. So the number is really huge for a bad hire.
What are what are some things that firms, maybe they're still on the fence about trying to do some things on their own, but like, what are some practical tips that you could teach us, that whether we do it on our own or we hire you or some other service like similar, that we could maybe put into practice for ourselves?
Sure, absolutely. I think number one is just everything you can to really brand your company as a place that potential great employees seek out, right? Whether it's your practice, your niche, your success, your history, your future, and make sure that the word is out, that I don't have to interview to learn all these amazing things about your organization, right? It's just common knowledge. I want to work with, immigration attorney Ruby Powers because she's known for this, right? Whatever those things might be. Your elevator pitch, make sure it's common knowledge in the candidate pools that are out there, whether it's in the school system or with other attorneys. Be the firm that people are seeking out. Let the people come to you as much as you need to go get the people. I think that's a really good tip.
That makes me think about something about that glass door. Like how I don't really look at, I don't know, I'm going to be curious about myself, but like, there's a lot, I feel like there's more probably disgruntled people who go there than happy people or something like that. But how much do you think people go look there? Or probably there's other knockoffs of that as well.
Absolutely. So I always tell candidates, look, what is a horrible environment for me could be an amazing environment for the next person. So you have to be very cautious about putting all of your eggs into the social media opinion basket, right? Mm-hmm. There might be some truth in those things, but as a law firm owner or a practice manager, it is critical that you stay on top of your Glassdoor reviews. And when you have happy employees, you make sure they boast and put their happiness online in a place like Glassdoor, because at the end of the day, people they're going to look at you as a business and how people view you. It could be, believe it or not, people still look at the Better Business Bureau. So the BBB, it's very old school. I'm probably dating myself, but BBB is still something where people look. Glassdoor is definitely a place where people look. And they also talk to other people in the industry. People, it's a small community.
It is.
Right. Yeah. So, it's very important that you keep the good word out there, and that at least if there are negative things, that you can overcome and compensate those with some positive things. But you should definitely stay on top of Glassdoor. And if you see a negative review, work really hard to address it, and also to get other people on your team to speak highly of you and really your favorable points. Because look, if you have a company of extroverts, right? An introvert probably won't fit well in your organization, right? Or if you're a company of immigration firms, then an attorney who's practicing mass tort, probably not a good fit for your firm. That's okay, right? Brand you for who you are, really sing your own praises, and stay on top of those reviews so that you can counter them when they do happen. Because every candidate, I would say probably 90% of the candidates do go out there and look. Not all of them will make it a part of their decision, but they're investigating. Maybe there's something that came out in the interview process. And if they go to Glassdoor, and I'll give you an example, bureaucracy. If it takes someone 3 months to get through your interview process, and they go on Glassdoor and it's substantiated by a review that says, I never could get anything done because it took 15 layers to get something done, their emotion and that feeling that they've experienced in that interview process is being substantiated on Glassdoor, right? So try to overcome those things and stay ahead of them so that those stories aren't sort of the foundation of who your company is.
So that makes me think of something else. Like, what do you think is an ideal interview process? Because I've had some friends just like they talk to someone on the phone and like, you're hired, show up tomorrow, and I'm like, what? But then I've heard of, the whole hire fast and hire slow and fire fast.
Fire fast.
But then I've also talked to people during during some economy issues, like where sometimes you have to hire a lot faster than the hire slow adage, because you might lose people. So I think that's like within reason or something like that. But anyway, what would you say is the ideal flow of from making a decision that a position needs to be filled to offering potentially?
Yeah. So I think what is important is the consistency in your process. I mean, time kills deals. That's just the way that it works. And it doesn't matter if you're selling your own services. If you have someone come in and they do a intake with you or an interview with you, and then they go away for a long period of time, the odds of closing them are much slimmer, right? It's the same way with a candidate. It's like courting and dating. It's like being in a relationship, or you're dating and you're hoping to enter into a relationship with someone. So there's chemistry involved, and you have to strike why that chemistry is good and everyone feels good about the situation. But you also need to make sure in that process that you do your due diligence, right? You don't want to go eloping with the candidate. But if you've done the same process, whether it takes 3 weeks or 1 week or 3 days, if you've been consistent in your process so that you can gauge all of your interviews equally, then you can make a sound decision. So that can be something as simple as every single candidate is going to do an initial HR call or office manager call and be evaluated for compensation, hours, what they're looking for in their next success, right? If you're looking for someone who's going to be a part of your culture and it's work-life balance, or if you're looking for a hardcore rainmaker and work-life balance doesn't exist, you need to know that when you're doing these interview processes. And consistency is when you're interviewing the candidates, ask them the same questions. It doesn't mean it can't lead off or you can't go down a different path because something comes up. But if you ask those initial questions and every single candidate is gauged on their response to that, then you're able to make notes in the interview, and then post-interview go back and go, okay, now what did Zina say? Now what did Ruby say? How did I feel about their responses? And you're able to basically grade them equally as opposed to based on memory or asking them or directing them with a different type of question. So consistency in that interviewing process is very important in being able to stack candidates against each other to make a good decision.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I spoke at the State Bar of Texas annual meeting about hiring and retaining and firing employees and culture a little bit too. And I thought about it. I was like, I think this comes down to two aspects. One is about delegation, even though we're talking about, that's more the post, party after you find the right fit. But it's such a key part about having staff. And the other one is consistency. I don't know if we're allowed to say it. Like, I know you mentioned like dating, but like I sort of thinking like managing staff is sort of like parenting. It's like you need to be consistent. If you say you're going to do this, you need to do it, because if you don't, then they'll be like, well, they sometimes do, sometimes they don't. And then like we can sort of skirt that situation,
Yes.
I definitely there's a lot to it. The other thing I think about consistency is Texas, well, people listening to this are all over the country, but from my few interactions with the Texas Workforce Commission, when one of the biggest things I learned was consistency. There's nothing that says you have to have 2 strikes, you're out. It could be 1 strike, whatever, but just be consistent with everybody and have it in your employment manual, and treat everyone the same. And that's another important thing about when you're interviewing is like, you need to be careful about being coherent and applying to EEOC, the Workforce Commission, at all of these things. And I think what's important is that maybe you're not the one doing the interviewing. Maybe you know these things, but maybe your staff doesn't know these things. And they're representing your firm. So those are some other, like, you're not supposed to ask, like, how old are you or something like,
right.
Oh my gosh, like, no,
you need to take off early to pick the kids up from school, like any of those questions.
Right, exactly. Like, I sort of cringe when I hear these things, because I know you're not supposed to do that,
Right.
But anyway,
so accidentally, right, Ruby? So They can absolutely just slip out. You can be having a casual conversation with someone and ask a question that down the road can be viewed, especially when someone doesn't get the job, as discriminatory. So you have to be very careful with that. And then, if you're a national firm and you're recruiting across this country and you're doing it as an office manager, maybe you don't know about pay transparency laws. Maybe you haven't paid attention to the fact of the rule that was passed by the FTC regarding non-competes. I mean, there could be a lot of different things that are just slipping through the cracks. Maybe even just, posting laws about what has to be in there from an EEOC perspective. So if you're leaving it up to your own devices and you don't have an HR department, or you don't have a really seasoned office manager who knows about recruiting or has gone through some of those things, unless you're an employment practice firm, hopefully you would have those down. But the other organizations, it can be quite risky for you and your staff. But I think consistency in your process, constantly recruiting, constantly keeping your pipeline, your network going, and constantly branding. I think those are just critical skills, even when you're not ready to hire. And then you talked about a job description. I want to talk and just sort of mention that, I've been in this industry for a long time, I think 34 years at this point. And when you look at our industry back in the day, when you put together a job description, HR and managers held your feet to the fire on what that job description said. Right. And they're very much used for onboarding, and job descriptions are used for accountability, for performance plans, PIPs, all of these different things. But nowadays, a job description is an advertisement. It is a brand that represents your firm when you're using social media and where you're posting an ad on LinkedIn or those different types of things. So it's really critical to figure out. And there's things that you need to know if you're recruiting for your firm and you're paying, $60,000 a year for a tool, how am I going to be efficient with this tool? And I think that's one of the key things that we have to pay attention to in looking at those types of things. That a job description, while someone needs to have a thorough job description day one before they even are made an offer, or along with their offer letter, right? A very detailed HR job description. But that's going to be very different than the job posting ad that is really an advertisement. Those things have changed. And so when you're putting an advertisement out there, it's more of like, if you're fishing, like setting a hook, right? Like putting your bait in the water to attract candidates. There are some rules as a professional recruiter that we know that other HR people or office managers might not know, or someone who's responsible for hiring. And for example, is when someone looks at a job description, I think it's like 80% of all applicants are looking for a job on their mobile phone. They're not at a desktop computer. They're on their mobile phone. So if you have a job description that I'm having to page up and scroll through 4 pages of a job description, we know that, number one, people just apply and they don't care if they're qualified or not. So it's wasting your time as an in-house person who's trying to spend time recruiting, right? Or they just apply and they have no idea if they're qualified or not. So that's increasing the work on in-house for you as a team, or for your team member who's doing the recruiting. So having something that's really easy to read, that's catchy, that taps on a few key things like benefits, and if it pay transparency state, it could be pay. Nowadays, it's about hybrid remote, flex hours, those types of things. And if people don't see that, or potential candidates don't see that, they're just going to scroll past you. Right?
Hmm.
So if you want qualified candidates, you have to think about your job description published online being a job advertisement. And then you have to follow through for compliance to make sure that they understand and see the original job description. That's really what they're going to be judged against and what they're being hired for. So there's the one social media post or the advertisement that's getting their attention, that's enticing them to apply to get the right people. And then there's the other HR'd job description that you want to make sure they have as well.
Well, because I thought that that was a distinction between the job posting versus the job description. Like the job posting would be a lot shorter, and the description might have a lot more nuance. Like you said, that would be held accountable for their performance and that they're accomplishing.
Well, I think that you probably know that. We've probably had a lot of conversations about it, or you've read it someplace. But I think there's a lot. I mean, if you go on right now and you go onto LinkedIn and you start looking, you will see 2-page job descriptions. You will see the job description that will be used, in the HR file as the formal position that we're hiring for, and they'll be hired and fired against that job description. So I think it's not common knowledge, and a lot of people, especially that, has come up in the industry like me, and it's sort of morphed. We didn't have online, used to, I ran an ad in classified, right? It was in the newspaper, right? So those days are gone for the most part. And so now, it's very different. And so the rules around that apply. And I think a lot of people, they don't realize that. And they're still, having their HR people craft a 4-page thoroughly detailed job description, and they're posting it online. And it's just, that is the way to scare. If you want to scare away a candidate, put a 2-page job posting online.
Oh,
right?
wow. Yeah.
And then you'll wonder why it's not viewed. No one's clicking through, no one's applying. Well, that's why, right? And instead you entice them, you engage them, you court them. And then you say, after you've sort of put all the disqualifiers out there as to why, they want to work and why they might not want to work for you, if they're still interested, then you say, I really want to share with you this detailed job description. Let me tell you about the job. And here's some information about the firm as well, or maybe prior to their first interview. But just remember, it is an advertisement. You don't need to put that 2-page job description on there.
I agree.
Or 4-page or 5-page.
So before we close up, I got a couple of questions. I was thinking about one about AI and just sort of how it's impacting this whole process and industry. And the other one was about the aging of the lawyer, the bar, and just sort of how that's affecting this. But AI, like what is the world like? Like if you don't put the right magic words, you're never going to get picked up by the bots or something, or what's going on these days?
Well, I think when we're talking about even before AI, as a company that's advertising online, there are certain things that if you do, your job is not findable. So for example, if you do attorney-lawyer, well, unless I'm searching as a candidate for a job that says attorney-lawyer, you're probably not going to pop up in that search, right? Okay. So using forward slashes, you should always use commas and spaces. And so that's even pre-AI. I think AI, there's a lot of things that we're seeing in that AI is helping to hire for companies and corporations, but we're going to see more and more AI on the candidate side to help them with the application process. And I think that's just now really starting to come into play, and AI is really more leaning towards the corporations. But I think stay tuned because it'll be interesting. AI is doing a lot of automatic disqualification of candidates. I think that AI is accidentally age discriminating. I think we have to be very careful with that. If you use tools that are even an applicant tracking system, right? If it's, for example, a lot of people, if I coach them to write their resume, I say, leave the dates off, go back 10 years. I don't want you to know what year I graduated from college, right? Because in ages, I don't want them to see that, right? But if you're using some of the systems that are out there and that are in place, some of the major name brand systems, they force you to go to their application, or you have an incomplete application process. And when you do that, then I'm forced to put in that I graduated a certain year. I've been tenured at a certain organization. And so now all of a sudden, I'm 65 years old. Now, all of a sudden, I've been out of college for 6 months, right? And those are, especially in a place like California, it just opens up a whole lot of things that can be problematic for you in the recruitment process. So I think just be mindful of that. If you're using AI tools and how it can have an impact on you. But overall, I think AI is making a professional recruiter more efficient. I think it could make an in-house person handling recruitment more efficient. However, if you're not trained on the tools and you don't know how to properly use them, then it's not making your person more efficient, right? You're paying for a lot of extra bells and whistles that you don't know how to use.
Yeah, you could pretty much say that for anything these days now, right? If you could have tools that you underutilize, or if you don't know how to make yourself more efficient. Okay, so you and I have had the conversations about like the aging population. I mean, I'm intrigued by this. I think I even saw some of the reports when I was listening to succession planning last week at the annual meeting, and they were. It's interesting because lawyers, let's see, they work longer than I think other professions do. And then they don't leave the profession as much as other people do. So it sort of makes it for that they'll be there longer and they'll work longer, and it's an older bar. But I think when you look at some of the statistics, there's not younger generation sort of like lowering the age because of the new influx in the pipeline. It looks like the pipeline's getting smaller, and so it brings up a whole different things, which might be a little outside of our scope, from like the succession planning, which I'm really intrigued by, or who's going to the institutional knowledge, or are we gonna have less attorneys out there to do the legal work, but maybe leveraging technology and efficiencies, maybe it'll sort of be a wash and it'll work out. But how are you seeing the aging bar? Like, what are you seeing from your perspective?
Yeah. So hopefully not to mix up numbers, but I think it's like 67% of, is it 67% of all managing partners are, baby boomers. And there's also, I think it's 4 million baby boomers retiring a year. So when you think about that and you think about the numbers, number one, what is the exit strategy, especially if it's a small firm, right? Especially with law firms where there's limitations about who you can pass your firm on to. It's not like you can just pass it to your wife unless she's an attorney, right? So there's those types of issues. The other thing, when I think about it from a recruitment perspective, is we have a massive gap in the number of people enrolling in JD programs, even in paralegal programs, right? So technology is going to be essential in handling the workload going forward. But then you also look that we have this biggest portion of our population, especially a huge portion of managing partners at law firms, that are exiting simultaneously. By the end of next year, Gen Zers are going to be the largest portion of our workforce population, right? So then, from a recruitment perspective, how are you mentoring those people, especially when you look at a generation that didn't even finish their school in person, right? They finished it online. You're a law firm who has a culture of being in the office, right? And so there's opportunities in there, and the fact that you have this aging population that has a very, a 40-year-old way of doing, maybe even more than 40 years, right? 100-year-old way of practicing law, or running a law firm. And now you have this large percentage of the workforce coming in with a different expectation. So there's an opportunity to shift your the culture of your firm to attract and retain quality candidates and quality professionals. But then you also have to think, if I'm a Gen Zer and I'm coming into the workforce, I want to know, what is your plan to groom and grow me, right? Who's my mentor, right? And can I relate to them? Is it someone is it someone who's going to push their belief system off on me and try to indoctrinate me into their way of doing business, or someone's going to understand, hey, I'm a little bit different, and maybe we should do some shifts in our culture, or our flex scheduling, or our hybrid remote, or whatever the case may be. So I think those are very true issues across the nation regarding recruitment and hiring, and under educating and things like that. But I also think that there's things that we haven't talked about that we could do in order to make sure that we're constantly paying attention to what we need to do in our organizations. And one is sorry, I sort of shifted off, but when we talk about an onboarding process being consistent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Making sure that we're bringing everyone in the same way, everyone's getting the same mentor, the same onboarding, the system training, right? Not only have we interviewed consistently and we've evaluated people consistently, but we've given them the same opportunity from day one to succeed, right?
Yeah.
And then once we bring them on board, let's check in with them. There's something called a stay interview, right? How do we get stay, whether it's using a Gallup card or whether it's just an open door policy, or maybe it's once a quarter, just sitting down, having lunch and saying, hey, what do you like? What do you don't like? What do you think we need to work on? And making sure they feel comfortable and truthfully sharing so that you have an opportunity to decide, okay, is this something we need to address as an organization, or is this just a one-off person issue, right? And so that you can stay ahead of your turnover and stay ahead of retention. And then the biggest thing that people do not do is exit interviewing. Sure, someone's going to leave your firm and they're going to be disgruntled and they're going to say, and not just your firm, it could be any company, right? And they can have all these negative things to say. Maybe they're burnt out. Maybe they're not making enough money and they're paying attention to Glassdoor and they know what other people are making and whatever it might be, right? But when people are consistently leaving your organization and they're consistently saying, my manager is a micromanager, or I've interviewed with 5 companies that have allowed me a hybrid remote situation, or I've interviewed with I have 3 offers paying X amount of dollars more than you are. Well, then maybe you have to self-evaluate and figure out what you have to do so that you don't have a revolving door at your organization. And the best way to do that is consistently and staying ahead and dealing with these things proactively before you have the end result of resignation and turnover and having to go back to the drawing board of hiring, whether it's through a recruiter, whether it's through an in-house person, whatever the case may be.
I love all of that. And, it's not just about the thorough acquisition and interviewing process, but the onboarding is so valuable, but also like your check-ins or your reviews that first year and subsequent, or you said stay interview, and then that exit interview, because there were times in the past where, and it just drove me crazy, where they like gave their resignation and it was because they were upset about something or they needed something, or maybe they wouldn't tell me the truth, so you're like, you try to read between the lines because they want to leave on a good note, and they know that the bar is really small. And then you're like, oh, what could we have done to be able to prevent this turnover? Because this is going to waste, if it would have been just like a small little raise or like a tweaking of their schedule or whatever, and we could have solved this, but by the time they give their resignation, it's almost like fruitless to try to reverse it. It's already too late. A lot of them have already took another job, already have these plans, plan a vacation in between starting, so trying to prevent that from happening. But I agree with you. That was a great reminder about the exit strategy, because just try to just like listen and learn, even though maybe it doesn't help you in that moment, but it'll help you in the long run find ways to improve.
Ruby, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Oftentimes when, as a recruiter, right, we're making offers to candidates and candidates are going, I have a counter offer. So what do you think a recruiter says to that candidate who has the counter offer?
I don't know, but those sort of like annoy me a little bit, because I'm like,
exactly. But as a managing partner or a business owner, think about this. I'm going to say to you as a candidate, is the reasons why you're looking and considering this other opportunity, have those situations been resolved? Is your micromanager gone, right? Do you now have a hybrid work schedule? Because at the end of the day, if you just counter offer with a higher raise and that's the only reason, great. It's not exactly. So all you're doing is band-aiding the situation as an employer. If you're not fixing the problem as to why your person wants to walk to begin with, then you're just Band-Aid. And maybe you need to Band-Aid the solution. Maybe they're on a big case. Maybe they're in charge of a big project, right? Maybe you do need to Band-Aid solution the situation. Maybe you need time to find someone. But at the end of the day, most situations, eventually that thing is going to come up again, and eventually you'll lose them anyway. So, rather than try to just Band-Aid solution things, maybe figure out what's driving people to get to that point to begin with.
Yeah, that was a good argument, because you're right. Like a few $1,000s or whatever, but you're going to have to learn a new culture. You might have a worse situation. You're going to be on your best behavior for the first few months, trying to learn who's all the unspoken rules of that new business, and company. Definitely, I agree. And I've had I have so many stories on these things, but that just be another day, I think.
Right.
Yeah, when I've had so many people come back to us, because either, I don't know, we try to keep a good relationship, but that pipeline, that's so real. I think that should be another big takeaway for people. And I've seen that for law clerks to potential attorneys, or just keeping relationships with potentials, maybe candidates, maybe it's not the right time now, but keeping that door open for the future. Especially
and out, really.
Yeah.
If the day someone leaves, they're nervous, they're scared. Maybe they really like you and don't want to disappoint you, but this is really a great opportunity.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, take them out for lunch in 3 months. Hey, how's the new job coming along? Look, if there's something I could change to make this firm better that would have made you stay, what was it? Right? What advice might you give me? And at that point, they might feel open and honest. And some people will just be transparent, period, from day one. But other people will be more reserved. And maybe those are the people whose opinion you really do want as well, right? It's 3 months later, it's 6 months later, let's stay in touch, right? Because now if you recruit them back, they're maybe a few years down the road, they have more experience, they have a larger client base. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why to stay connected with the people, like you said, and stay networking. But I also think just circling back down the road when they feel like they can confidently share how they really felt about things that weren't working in your organization, so that you can pivot and correct, is really good feedback.
Yeah, I like that idea. I don't think I purposely did that, but I did stay in touch with people. But I didn't do what you just said. I think that's a good idea, because I think then people are more calm, and you can maybe have a more honest chat. Right, exactly. Well, it's been great, Zina. So we always like to ask, what do you think your superpower is? What would you say?
So that's interesting. So I belong to a girl group, as you know, Ruby, and they like to point out what is my superpower, because I really struggle with knowing what that is. But I think that is that, and I think they're right in this, that I'm very big picture and I'm very visionary thinker. I'm constantly looking for a new opportunity, what else I can do, how I can pivot, how I can reinvent something, do it better, do it differently. But I'm also very tactical. I can roll up my sleeves. I can dig in the trenches. I can get things done. I can still run a desk if I need to. So very tactical, but very visionary. And I don't think a lot of people can flow between those two spaces. So I think that's
good point. Yeah, I agree. But that's a cool one. So watch out. Zina's got that superpower.
There you go.
Okay, so then my other question, because I think I'm scoping out who I want to play games with. What's your favorite board game?
So the funny part is okay, so first I love cards, and my favorite, I'm a card player, and I really like cribbage, and it's kind of an old school game. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it.
Someone's mentioned it before, but I need to take this seriously. Okay.
So I love cribbage, and I love all card games. I like hearts and spades, and just a lot of different card games. So when my kids were growing up, I hated Monopoly. I absolutely hated it, and I would hide the pieces to not have to play. I know, don't judge me. I'm a horrible parent. But we had other options like Scrabble or Life, which took a million years. But I have grown with my granddaughter to actually love Monopoly. I'm not sure if it's my favorite game, because I always defer to card games. But I do like Monopoly. We like to play the headgear. I don't know if you. flash up with your phones. We do that a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah, that's fun. Yeah.
But and recently, so I don't know if this is answering a question about my favorite game, but I'm pretty eclectic. And we actually I have a son who loves Dungeons and Dragons. So we have a
Oh,
family game going of Dungeons and Dragons. I have a character. Her name is Zella. So it's so cool. I never thought I would like anything like this, but we're doing it for him because he's totally into it. And it's brought our whole family together with these characters. We even went to the Renaissance Festival in our characters. And we've had this Dungeon and Dragon game going. And so about every 2 weeks we meet and do this. So I love that because it's bringing our family together to do something that no one would do otherwise. So that's super cool.
wow, that's awesome. Well, when the first time I heard D&D, I thought we were talking about do not disturb, and then I realized we're not doing
Yeah. I never believed that I would be playing D&D. I promise you. It's been like all of us, when we started, we were like, oh, we got to go to have to go to Sean's house and play D&D. And then we get there and we realize we're actually having a good time. It's creative and, it's been a lot of fun to bring us together. I believe in games. I don't care what they are, games, cards, whatever it can do to bring friends and family together. I'm all for it.
Yeah, I definitely have fun on this question and learning more about my guests. I think I'm going to make a chart of everybody's answers and figure out who when I have a party of some sort and we are in the same city. So how can people find you? So you gave us a lot of great value, whether we try to do this on our own or we go out and try to find people like you to hire, because this is a constant thing. What are some of the ways that we could find you to connect?
Sure. Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's just LinkedIn, Zina Brown, ZinaBrown. I don't know if there's a link where I can share my link, but we'll LinkedIn.
Put in the show notes.
Okay.
So yeah.
Wonderful. And then email, which is my first name, Zina, Z like zebra, INA @popuptalent.com. And I think that when it comes to providing a service where a small to mid-sized firm can get a professional recruiter at a fraction of the price to get a hire quickly and efficiently, I'm your gal. So hopefully they'll reach out to me.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. Well, I really appreciate it. Thanks for your time. And thanks everyone. Yeah, thanks for everyone who was listening. I think we learned a lot, and just the consistency, the exit interview, like hiring for help, knowing people who know what they're doing, just the job description, like there's just so much to this. Thanks to everyone for joining us on this insightful journey. Your time and engagements meant the world to us. If you enjoyed this episode, definitely subscribe, send it to a friend, tell other people, put a positive little review wherever you're on where you find this on the podcast world. And if you want to continue on the conversation, we have the Power Up Your Practice Facebook group. And we also have a newsletter where we give out every month lots of different good information, and really, really exciting. We haven't really been making a big deal about this, but my new book called Power Up Your Practice is coming out this summer. And so we're putting the finishing touches on it. So we're really excited to get that out. And you'll hear more as we progress through the summer. So thank you again, Zina, and everyone. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks, Ruby. Congrats on the book. Excited to see
you.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Feeling overwhelmed by admin tasks? You're not alone. Many immigration lawyers are in the same boat. That's where Staffy comes in. Over 90 law firm owners just like you have turned to Staffy for help with legal, administrative, marketing, and client-facing work. Now, Staffy's mission: to help lawyers find balance while growing their firm. With bilingual virtual staff and full HR support, they take the hassle out of a team management and focus on what matters most: your clients and your practice. I've personally benefited from Staffy's support with 7 virtual assistants of my own across various areas of 2 of my businesses, including my law firm. Now, schedule a free initial consultation with Staffy. That's stafi.cc, and use the code RUBY. That's RUBY for $500 off. Thank you for tuning in to the Power Up Your Practice Law Practice Management Podcast. I'm your host, Ruby Powers, and it's been a pleasure sharing this time with you. Join us next week for another episode where we'll continue to explore insightful strategies for success. Power Up Your Practice with us. See you next time.